Harihi Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanao Bhunaktu Sahaviryan Karavavahai Tejasvi Navadhitamastoma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai. So then we have the Pandavas then in Ekachakra at the Brahman's house, and then Kunti is noticed that Kunti and Bhima were staying back. I mean, Kunti is staying back every day, and then Bhima, it was his turn in rotation to stay back and take care of his mother. The other 4 Pandavas will go out begging. And so then now she has heard the some anxiety going on in the house, some crying and other discussions, and so she figures out that the reason is that every few years then one family has to send a family member with the food to feed Baka, so that Baka doesn't just indiscriminately come to the village and just eat anybody he likes. This way it'll be in a regulated fashion. And so then they had suggested, we'll just take you a lot of food, but being a Rakshasa, Baka said, okay, the food's fine, but also the person who brings the food, he'll eat. So, throws a little bit of a complication there. But at the same time, we'll protect the village, the town and everything from any disturbances, because the king was very weak. So now that Kunti's ascertained this, she's told the Brahmin that, don't worry, my son knows special mantras to kill Rakshasas. He'll go take care of this because he's done it before. The Brahmin then, is unsure how can they expect a guest to take on their problem. Then when he sees that Kunti's very serious about it, then okay, he agrees. And then she goes back, tells Bhima. Bhima agrees because they want to do something for the family. And at the same time, he's always looking forward to a good fight, right? Otherwise, he's sitting there and just doing Brahmin stuff. So just then the other Pandavas come back. So that's where we continue. Just as Kunti and Bhima finished speaking, the other Pandavas returned. Yudhishthira caught Bhima's eye and sensed at once that his younger brother was contemplating something wonderful, right? Because when Bhima's got a glimmer, a sparkle in his eye, he's going to do something very amazing and wild and all that. Now, whether it's the appropriate time for something wild, that's another thing. That's why Yudhishthira is there as the elder brother to control it. But otherwise, Bhima's he loves doing something amazing like that. He sat by his mother and asked quietly, what does Bhima have on his mind? It seems he is about to do something extraordinary, some extraordinary deed. Is something you have ordered, or is it some plan of his own? Right? So is Kunti, did she ask him to do this, or he just came up with it? Kunti told her son what had transpired. When Yudhishthira learned that Bhima was about to go out to meet Baka, he became alarmed. Mother, you have made this Brahmin a rash promise. Surely it is never sanctioned to sacrifice one's own son for that of another. Right? So if one family has a problem, their son is in danger, it's not that you sacrifice your son to save his son. It's just not, because the point is that a son is lost, so what has been gained? All my hopes of overpowering Dhritarashtra's sons and regaining the kingdom depend on Bhima's power. Kunti smiled slightly and reassured Yudhishthira. She reminded him of Bhima's supernatural prowess, how even as an infant he had crushed a great rock to powder, how he had easily carried all of them through the forest while running at the speed of wind, how he had slain the immensely strong Hidimba. It was not out of foolishness that I made my offer to the Brahmin. It is always a ruler's duty to protect the Brahmanas, right? Because they're Kshatriyas. They may be they may be taking the role of Brahmins. So taking the role of Brahmins, they do the duty of Brahmins. But it doesn't mean that they're still not Kshatriyas. And so if there's an opportunity to perform their duty as a Kshatriya, then they will. Right? So that's the whole point, is that whatever duty you accept the obligations that are there, and you get the benefits of that. So that's the whole point. It says whatever your duty is, you have to follow that. You can't just do whatever you want. Because the tendency is people will take the benefits from whatever variety of services are there and take no obligations. Right? That would be what people. But when you take a benefit, you have to take the obligation that goes with it. Right? It's just like, let's say you want a house. That means you have to maintain it. You want a car. You have to put petrol. You have to maintain it. Right? You want to cook. Means you have to wash the dishes. They go together. You can't just, cook every day and never wash dishes. Right? It doesn't work like that. So here is that they're living the life of a Brahmin, so they're performing the duties of a Brahmin. It's not that they're Kshatriyas who are then just going out and begging. No, they have to live as Brahmins and live a Brahminical lifestyle, do Brahminical duties. Then they can live by begging. And then when the opportunity is there that they are not living as Kshatriyas, as Brahmins, and they can live again as Kshatriyas, then they'll take up their duty, right? So you only do someone else's duty if yours is not available. But when you take it up, you have to follow the rules that follow that duty. You can't say, no, but in my position, I don't have to do that. No, you've taken up another occupation. So here then is a chance for them as Kshatriyas to protect the family. Right? So they're still going to be in their position of Brahmins, but here there's a moment where Bhima can go out and do his Kshatriya duties and that. And then once those are finished, the Brahmins have been protected, which is the Kshatriya's duty. So he goes out, he fights, he establishes Dharma, he protects the Brahmins. That's done. Then when he comes back, then he'll again have to take up his Brahminical lifestyle. Does that make sense? So even if you switch for that, but then you fully do all that. And then when you come back, you fully do all this. Not that you just pick and choose. By this act, we will achieve two things. We will reward the Brahman's kindness towards us, and we will earn much religious merit. Because if Bhima does this, because they're all together, they all get that merit. Kunti told her son that she had been wondering how to repay the Brahmin for some time. This opportunity was obviously the Lord's arrangement for them. And because Yudhishthira Maharaj makes the point that when you're to be successful in your action, then you have to be focused. You have to make an endeavor, and you have to depend on the Supreme Lord. These three things. So focus means you know who you are, what the situation is, what the proper knowledge, what the proper skills are, and application, what effect they can do. Then you have to, and so being focused on what is the endeavor, you perform the activity. That's the second, the endeavor. Then from that, the result is not up to us. It's up to Krishna. It's his laws. So depending upon our position, our karma, what Krishna, as devotees, and what Krishna's plan is, then the results will come how Krishna wants. But we still, whatever situation we're in, we see it, we're focused, we make our endeavor to please Krishna, then how it works out, that's up to Krishna. Like that. So devotees, by saying, oh, it's up to Krishna, they're not lazy. They're still endeavoring. It means what your situation right now, that's what you do. Yudhishthira, this opportunity is obviously the Lord's arrangement for them. Yudhishthira pondered Kunti's words, looking across at the smiling Bhima, because Bhima is really happy. He replied, you have spoken well. Your decision is well considered, right? Because the first thing is just this, but then where she presents the whole thing. So that's the whole point, is that if you have that position of authority, you make your decisions. But when someone else presents something, and that you have to listen to it and see what's the whole thing, not just that, oh, this guy never said, you listen what it is. And then if it's right, then it's good. Not that, oh, I didn't think it up, so we won't use it. No, whatever is proper is what we use. And it's the same way as whatever is not proper, you don't use. So even someone comes up, they make the whole thing, they thought it up. If it's not good, you don't have to use it. Not that, oh, but he feels like it and this and that. No. Because of your compassion towards the Brahmana, Bhima will surely kill the demon Baka, but you must ensure that no one comes to know that it was him. So she's saying is that because as a Kshatriya, you're making this endeavor to protect the Brahmins, just that piety itself will protect Bhima, right? You protect religion, religion protects you, right? Yudhishthira was not so, but at the same time, he didn't want the Kauravas to find out about this, right? Because they're out in the middle of the forest. No one's going to see anything that Hidimba was killed. But here they're in the town. Baka's killed, people are going to know. They're going to talk about it. And then they're going to wonder what happened. Yudhishthira was not sure if the Kauravas knew that he and his brothers were still alive, because they didn't know about, they just knew the house was burnt down and there's a good chance that, the housekeeper was killed. But they don't know about the tribal woman and her 5 sons, that they also died in that fire, so then everybody thinks the Pandavas died. They don't know that. So they're unaware if they thought, oh, they got, or there's a tunnel, did they find the tunnel? Anything could happen. Their spies, Yudhishthira was not sure if Kauravas knew that he and his brothers were still alive. Their spies would soon inform them of Baka's death. They may well suspect it was Bhima who had killed him, because who else kills Rakshasas, right? Few other men were capable of killing such powerful Rakshasa. That night, while the village slept, Bhima quietly left the Brahmin's house. He drove the cartload with food towards the forest where Baka dwelt. The aroma of the food was overpowering, because it appears that maybe the others are going in the day, but he left at night when everybody went to sleep. Probably Baka is sitting there and wondering, when's my food coming, right? He drove the cart loaded with food towards the forest where Baka dwelt, right? Because it has to be a big cart, and the cart has so much food on it. After living for so long on meager forest fare and whatever alms the brothers were able to collect, right? Because when they're in the forest, they just get whatever, fruits and roots and berries and that. And then they go out begging whatever they get, some rice, some other things like this. Bhima was ravenous. He began to eat the food from the cart. On his way into the forest, he shouted Baka's name. So as he's going to the forest, he's pushing the cart, he's eating the food, and then between bites, he's calling Baka's name. So he's doing instead of going there, eating the food, then calling Baka, or going there, calling Baka, he's eating the food because he's really hungry. The Rakshasa heard Bhima's approach and became inflamed with anger. He ran towards the Pandava yelling, I am Baka, right? Because who goes into the forest calling the Rakshasa? They go into the forest not, and probably when they get there, then Baka, smells the food, then he comes out. Bhima saw him emerge from among the trees. The earth resounded with his footsteps, and his shouts were deafening. He had a huge body, red eyes, red beard, and red hair. Right, so it seems he has a red beard, because we saw before it seemed Hidimba didn't mention so much his beard, just he has this one, big shock of hair on his head. His mouth opened from ear to ear. Now that's a mouth. And his forehead was furrowed into 3 lines as he looked upon Bhima eating his food. Right? He's kind of like, what? He's like, what? When you, like this. Baka stopped near the cart and thundered, who is this fool who is eating in my presence the food intended for me? In one sense, by his rule, he eats the person who brings the food. So if the person eats the food, he's going to get eaten anyway. So it's not that it makes any difference on the outcome. It's not like, but his point is, people are afraid, so they bring the food, and hopefully he'll be merciful, like this. Who is eating my present the food intended for me? He surely desires to be dispatched at once to death's abode. Bhima glanced derisively at the Rakshasa and smiled. He ignored his challenge and continued eating. Right? So I guess he really wanted to upset him, because you have a good fight if he's angry. So he's eating all the food. Baka roared in fury. He rushed at Bhima with arms upraised. Still the Pandava continued to eat. Baka brought his 2 fists down upon Bhima's back with the force of a thunderbolt. Without flinching in the least, Bhima went on eating, right? So the Rakshasa is running up behind him, beating him with his fist, and he just keeps on eating because he's hungry. He did not even look at the Rakshasa. It was like, ugh, hey, he just kept eating. Bhaka roared again and tore up a huge tree. As he whirled it above his head, Bhima stood up, washed his hand from the pitcher of water on the cart, right? Because it's like you're going to, eating, then your hands become contaminated and that. And, fighting is a duty, so you have to be, in proper thing. Like you see when the Kshatriyas are going to use the mantras for the astras, then they do achman, like that. So the pure state is required. Then he leapt down from the cart and faced the infuriated demon. Right? So it seems he's pushing the cart, eating the food. Then he gets there. Then he continues eating. He sits on the cart and keeps eating the food, like that. And then only when he's finished, washes his hands, then he comes down from the cart. Now he faces the demon. Bhaka hurled the tree at Bhima with all his strength. Bhima smilingly caught it in his left hand and threw it back. Right? Because right hand is considered your auspicious hand. The left is not. It's impure. So someone throws something, you catch it with the left hand like that. They're using all their strength. You catch it with the left hand, that means that's not your strong hand. Right? Your right hand is your strong hand. So that's just showing that how much stronger you are. It's just another way to upset the opponent. The Rakshasa uprooted one tree after another and hurled them at Bhima, who caught each of them and sent them back. Soon the whole area was cleared of trees, right? So now it's cleared of trees, now you can have a good wrestling match. Screaming out his own name again and again, Bhaka threw himself upon Bhima and seized him. Bhima also gripped the demon with his own powerful arms. The two dragged each other violently, each trying to kick the other's legs out from underneath them, right? So they're standing. So they're trying to get the other on the ground through the grappling, like that. So fighting is there, but if you get them on the ground, then you have a stronger position. They fell to the ground, still locked in one another's arms. They rolled about, making the ground tremble. Bhima tightened his grip. He repeatedly smashed the demon's head with his own forehead. So he's giving him head butts, right? He's holding him and then butting his head like this. So gradually, Bhaka tired. Bhima pulled free of his grasp and pounded the demon with his fists. He pressed down on Bhaka's chest with his knees and struck him crushing blows that shook the earth. Bhaka fell unconscious, and Bhima rolled him onto his stomach. Placing one knee on his back, he seized his neck with one hand and his waistcloth with the other. With great force, Bhima broke the demon's back in two, right? He also did that with Bhaka, but Bhaka he did it just by bending him on a tree. But in this one, then he's down on the ground, and so then he puts his knee and he just pulls him in half like that. As he died, Bhaka vomited blood and let out a fearful yell that filled the forest. Hearing him scream, Bhaka's friends and relatives came out of their houses, right? Because they're out there fighting, okay, this goes on, but it's, who's going to be there? If it's humans always lose generally to Rakshasas. Very rare they don't. But when they hear Bhaka scream like that, they know there's some problem. They looked at horror at his mountainous form lying in a pool of blood. Bhima reassured the terrified Rakshasas that he was not going to attack them, right? Because they came out and then they're worried, now is he going to attack us? He's telling them, no, I haven't come here to attack you. I've only come here for this guy. And so you don't have to worry. This one has been killed due to his excessive fondness for human flesh. Give up killing men, otherwise this fate awaits you all, right? So that for Bhaka, it says you give up, how do you say? Killing the people, otherwise if you kill, then I'll come and kill you, right? And Bhaka must be the biggest of them, because his friends and relatives. So if Bhaka's been killed, then surely this guy can get them. The Rakshasas immediately assessed, saying, "It shall be so." Then they ran from that place, leaving Bhima with Bhaka's body. From that time on, the people of Ekachakra noticed that the Rakshasas became peaceable towards them. So now whether they regularly took the food out there and they didn't eat anybody, or if they were just nice, whatever it was. But in any case, the Rakshasas were being properly behaved. It's just, properly interacting. Bhima lifted Bhaka's corpse and placed it on the cart, right? Because he's already eaten all the food, right? Unseen by anyone, he deposited it on the town gate and then returned to the Brahman's house. So at night he went out, when everyone's asleep, killed Bhaka, came back, then placed him on the gate, and then went back to the house and went to sleep. His mother and brothers were relieved to see him, and he described to them all that had happened, right? So Kshatriyas, they want to hear everything. What was that? What moves he used, how he hit him, what was the Chapter 9, the Gandharva Angaraparna. When the sun rose, the people of Ekachakra found Bhakta's dead body. They were astonished to see it lying there in a twisted mess, its mouth and eyes wide open. The citizens' hair stood on end and their mouths fell open in amazement. Thousands of people assembled, all asking who had killed him. Gradually they realized it had been the Brahmin's turn to take food to the demon the previous night. So they didn't know who it was, at first, but then if they go down the list, because there's a list of how it goes through the village, and so every few years it comes up, so they know it's this Brahmin. A noisy crowd soon gathered outside the Brahmin's house, right? People just, they have to know these things. While the Pandavas remained inside, the Brahmin addressed the people. Yesterday, as I sat by the roadside, weeping at the thought of my plight, a Brahmin came by. When he found out the cause of my distress, he promised to deliver me and the town from this constant danger, right? So he's not even saying, my guest did it, because the Pandavas, they don't want him to know about them. Because otherwise they'll say, yes, these Brahmins came to town, there's 5 brothers with their mother, and the really big one, he went out, and like that, he killed, it's kind of like, well, who does that mean, right? So he doesn't even mention them. They're in the house, he goes out, so, people may or may not really, they'll know that they're there, but they won't consider them. And so he'll say, I was there, and just some Brahmin came by. I don't even know who he was. Learned in the incantations that evoked celestial weapons, the Brahmin assured me he would take the food to Bhakta on my behalf and kill him. He must have succeeded in this inconceivable feat because Bhakta now lies dead. So he doesn't know who he is, and he's not there. He just happened to be passing through town. The people looked at one another in wonder. Then they laughed and shouted in joy, right? Because now they know, okay, Bhakta's dead. They declared a festival to celebrate the Rakshasa's death. The Pandavas continued to live at the Brahmin's house as Vyasa had instructed them, because he said he'd come back for them, and give them further instructions. So he hasn't come, so then they just continued to live there. It had been months since the sage had last spoken with them. They expected his return at any time. And they passed their days in begging alms and studying the Vedic scriptures, right? So they're using their time. Since they're in the forest, they're living a life like a Brahmin, like a Vanaprastha. So they're going to then study the scriptures, because that's what Brahmins do. And Kshatriyas, the more they know the scriptures, the better they rule like that. Because the Brahmins are going to speak from scriptures to give an understanding of what is duty. And so the more they know that, the more they'll understand the wisdom given by the Brahmins, right? Because it's one thing to know the knowledge, it's another thing to appreciate the wisdom. Then if you don't know the knowledge, you may really not appreciate the wisdom. But if you know the knowledge, then you see how that knowledge is applied by that wisdom, then they are able to practically use it. One day a wandering ascetic came to the Brahmin's house and accepted his invitation to stay for a few days. After he had been duly worshipped and fed by the Brahmin and his family, the ascetic told stories from his travels. So these ascetics, they're out and they wander, so they don't have a place to stay and things like that. And so in that, they're going to see so many wonderful things. And since they're being hosted and all that, they'll tell, some nice, interesting stories, that'll, so you see what's going on in the country, some festivals, how, Shastra is being practiced and lived and applied, and who did great things, and, just something nice like that. The Pandavas listened along with the Brahmin's family. They heard about a great Swāyamvar ceremony soon to be held in Kampilia for Draupadi, right? Because they had been to Kampili before. King Drupad's daughter. This princess, the ascetic said, was not born of a woman, but had been born along with her brother Dristadumna from the sacrificial fire. Right, so they're also very special. They're born from the demigods. She's born from the fire. The Pandavas were intrigued. They asked, please tell us how it is possible that Draupadi and her brother could have appeared from fire. We desire to hear everything you know. Okay, so that will end this story of Bhakta and the Ekachakra aspect there. And next we'll start this whole story about Draupadi and everything connected with her appearance, her brother's appearance, and the whole background, the enmity between Drona and Drupad and how this came up. So I'll end here. Om Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.